Well, collectors, here we are. It's August the 15th, and we're going to do a seminar on Kriegsmarine daggers. But it's been my custom, before we get into the seminar, I'd like to show you a little more with some of the things that are around our house. In fact, one of the chairs I'm sitting in is really something that it's all carved and has some fabulous figures on it, and it was a chair that was used to sign armistice and things like that. Was carried in the field, and it actually, if you pull on here, the whole thing folds up. It's really an amazing thing. The back comes off of it. It's quite a chair. I like it a lot. And then behind this is a silk coming from China. When the Germans had colonies in China, the Chinese people decided there must be a way to make some money off of all these sailors. So they started doing these beautiful silks. This particular one comes from Qingdao in 1906 to 1909 was when the man served there, and it portrays an admiral's flag along with the Imperial helmet, Imperial eagle, and a great flag, and a picture of the man who brought it home. He was in the artillery, which is noted on the lower part of the silk. Just a great thing. You see a lot of these, but rarely are they this big. So I decided to keep this one, and it looks great in a room. This is a room we call the morning room. That's what Marie calls it. And then I'll show you over here. On this wall, I guess first, I have a nice painting of a British biplane. He's kind of soaring over an embankment here with a couple waving to him below with a nice tree. I think it's really a great painting. And I also have a painting on the other wall here of Field Marshal Spirula. You collectors probably remember Spirula. He was the Panzer General in charge of Spain during the Civil War. Not Panzer, but Luftwaffe. And here he's a full field marshal. I love his face. I mean, when he says something, don't you think you better do it? Would you question that man? And it shows his awards. And this painting is in the original frame, and it came from the airport in Paris during the time when the Germans occupied France, starting in June of 1940. So that's a pretty cool thing that I really love. And then over here, I'll shut this blind so you can see it. This is a lovely bronze of the Kaiser, and he gave it to his brother. A beautiful marble stand with dedication on it, and the detail is just outstanding to the Kaiser. Very, very beautiful thing. So then I'll show you one more thing in this room. I have a cabinet that I like to keep my silver pieces. I always liked silver pieces going back to the 70s. I've always tried to put a piece or two away that was interesting. And in this cabinet I have my Adolf Hitler silver collection, as well as a lot of Deutscher Hof railway pieces, the Nuremberg hotel pieces, the Bonschutz pieces, I should say. And I'll just show you a couple things that are kind of interesting. This is one of my pride and joys, an original Adolf Hitler cigar clipper. Just beautiful. I love it. And then some other things. These are Hitler tableware pieces. This is a large tablespoon. I don't clean my AH silverware. I like it to just get tarnished. I know it's shiny underneath, but they're always beautiful things. And then they have the hallmarks on the reverse here, the silver hallmarks. So those are cool things, and some of the rarer pieces, like these are quite rare. A gravy ladle, and this is for serving gelatin. Great things. And then one of the pieces that I'm most proud of here. This is a crystal ink blotter. You know, they used to have to blot the ink in the old days when they had pen and ink. And it was given to Eva Braun, which it has a facsimile of Eva Braun's signature on it. And then on the other side, it was given to Eva zum Julfest, 1943, Gretel und Hermann. Well, Gretel was Eva's sister, and guess who she was married to? Hermann Fegelein, a general in the SS, and that's why it's called Julfest instead of Weihnachten. And as you all know, Fegelein didn't make it through the war. He was trying to sneak out of the bunker at the end of the war, and Hitler had him shot, despite the fact that Gretel was pregnant with Hitler's nephew. And another thing that's neat, the silver blotter still has Eva's signatures on them, and if you look at it in a mirror, I don't know whether you can see it in this light, you can see Eva's signature there. Is that cool or what? I think it is. And in case you need a topper for your liquor bottle, DR Deutsches Reichsbahn. So that came from the railway system. A neat thing, very rare piece. And some other things. I have a piece here. I show this to a lot of people. It has political eagles on both of the ends of it. And I asked people, what do you think it was for? You can see it has a cutout here. And almost no one knows what it was for. And you maybe can guess too, collectors, but okay, I'll tell you. It was used for toothpicks. Isn't that neat? You would never guess. But anyhow, there's a lot of beautiful things in here. You can open this other door and you can see different things. This I love a lot. It was given for 25 years service to an Icorn employee with the squirrel on top. Isn't that great? Just wonderful. Yeah, and these are all Ribbentrop silverware and more AH silverware. These are Eva Braun silverware on the end. Klesheim Castle. Some beautiful Goering pieces. These are really fabulous. Made for Hermann Goering, and they're French. They actually came out of Hermann Goering's hunting suitcase. So he must have used this fancy stuff while he was out hunting. I guess when you were one of the richest men in the world, you could afford to do something like that. But these are some of the finest flatware I've ever seen. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get to the Kriegsmarine daggers, and I'm sure that's what you really want to see. But anyhow, it's good to see other stuff too. And I collect a little bit of everything, I guess, just the way I am. So we'll go downstairs and we'll start the Kriegsmarine seminar, okay? Well, here we are, collectors. We're going to do the seminar on Kriegsmarine daggers. It's the 15th of August. And just before I start, I just want to say something. Most of you seasoned people, at least, knew Lieutenant Colonel Thomas M. Johnson. And it's a very sad, sad thing to let you know, if you haven't read it already, that he passed away a couple of weeks ago. And there was no greater friend of the hobby than Tom Johnson. He loved it. He was in business for, over 40 years. He wrote over 32 reference books on German edge weapons. He was my friend. We also were partners in the MAC show together for 30 years. It's a big loss, and he will be sorely missed. So, and then on another thing, I've been a while since I've been able to do this seminar, because I had to have a sort of a major operation. But I'm okay. It's all that old men's stuff with prostate and bladder stones and all those kind of problems, but at least nothing's malignant, so I'm getting all healed up again, and I should be back to normal in no time, hopefully. So now we'll talk about naval daggers. When we ended the seminar last time, we ended with the 1921 models with black grips. I hope you all saw that seminar and you'll know what I mean. The black grips were kind of a sign of the Navy being saddened by the awful loss that they took in World War I, plus the reduction of the Navy and so forth. But by 1929, even though it was the Depression was just starting to come in, the Navy felt a little bit better about themselves, and they decided that they would get rid of the black grip on their dagger and go back to having a white grip. So what we have then is the introduction of the 1929 model. The 1929 model was almost essentially the same as the 21 model, except for the fact that the grip was changed to white or a yellow color, as this one is. The pommel is the same pommel that was used on the 1848 models and rejuvenated again after the Kaiser went into exile. We call it a ball pommel, but if you look at it closely, you can see it's really a series of nicely enhanced cattails and reeds, and they're all positioned over a cresting wave at the bottom. You see that? It's fun to look at those and look at the handwork that was done on them. The crossguard was the same crossguard that was introduced with the 1919 model. And they also wore lightning bolt scabbards as well as hammered scabbards, which this one is, but you can still see they're using the figure 8 type carrying bands, which generally made their way out of the picture as we go into the 1930s. This particular piece just has a plain standard naval style blade. A very, very beautiful condition. So that's the 1929 model. And then there were officers, naval officers, that didn't want to buy the 1929 model, and they decided to stay with their Imperial dagger. In this case, this Imperial dagger belonged to a naval officer that served during both periods. You were allowed to do this as long as you served with honor. You could wear your old dagger, or you could even wear your father's dagger if he served with honor. So you'll see a lot of the old-time naval officers still with their Imperial dirks. What this officer did, which a lot of people did, in April of 1935, or 1938, excuse me, 1938, April, the Navy finally decided to get rid of the ball top. They had the ball top, believe it or not, almost 5.5 years after Hitler came to power before they adopted the eagle and swastika pommel. So this naval officer then got rid of his Imperial pommel, or he may have had a ball pommel too, and adopted the Third Reich pommel. So what I'll show you about these early naval daggers, the ones that had the ball pommel on them, when the pommel was changed to the eagle and swastika, they had a special changeover pommel made, thousands of them, and they were delivered to the naval harbors and all the naval ships. And it was kind of up to the officer to put the pommel on himself or have the machine shop do it for him. But these changeover pommels are kind of special in that they're different from normal pommels. This particular pommel is a changeover pommel, so we know that this dagger had a ball top on it. The standard, so you can see what I'm talking about. If you look at this changeover from the side, see how far the wreath and swastika stick out and the wings are very curved? This is a standard pommel. See the difference? So by just knowing that, you can readily tell when you have a changeover dagger. Other pommels, changeover pommels, here's a couple of them here. See how they look? See how the swastika is way out, the wreath, and the wings are highly curved? Just by studying it a little bit, you should recognize that. It's not difficult. So that's an important thing to know if you're collecting naval daggers. So with a piece like this, it's otherwise it's a standard Eichhorn piece. It has a 1935 through 41 mark, so it was probably made in 35, 36, 37, or even 38 when the changeover happened in April of that year. Everything else is pretty normal about it with a double-edged blade. So we go from there to what I consider something very important with naval daggers. If you look at those two daggers, you say, they're both the same. They're Navy daggers. Well, are they really the same? If you look at some of the features, first of all, the crossguard. Look at the size of the center block where the fouled anchor is on that crossguard compared to the size on this crossguard. Gee, I wonder why that is. Well, it's because this crossguard was produced by the Carl Eichhorn firm, and this crossguard was produced by the WKC firm. So if you have a dagger that's marked Eichhorn, you don't want to see a WKC crossguard on it, do you? So if you study these things, you can really learn a lot. The same is true of the pommels. This is a typical Eichhorn pommel. This is a typical WKC pommel. Look at the difference in the heads and the breast feathering, the way they're hand enhanced. There's a lot of differences if you study the two. Isn't that neat? You probably never knew that. And it doesn't end there, not by a long shot. If you look at the scabbards, you say, well, they're both lightning bolt scabbards. Well, that's true. But if you study the icorn, for instance, first of all, let's identify what's on them. These things here are called palmettes. Those three sets of figures. And here also. Then we have the lightning bolts. And then you'll see little round things, two little round things with pebbling inside. They're called ermine feet. And then at the bottom is what we call acanthus leaves. Now, the palmettes on the icorn, you can see start right here at this point. Whereas on the WKC, look at that. They start about 1/4 of an inch lower. You see that? Then if you look at the ermine feet, compare the two, the WKC ermine feet are bigger than the icorn ermine feet. See, you can see that. Also, the scabbard bands on WKCs are more off the surface than icorns. They're separate fittings. The bands are separate fittings, but look how they're slightly wider and they're off the surface more. Both pieces have the same serrated triple eyelets. But see, that's very, very interesting. And if you're going to collect, you want to know those differences. I'll show you something else here too. We were talking about acanthus leaves. This is an Alcozo dagger. And look at the acanthus leaves on the Alcozo compared to the other two. They're pointed. Acanthus leaves were usually pointed on Imperial naval dirks where they had them, and Alcozo never changed them. They kept them the same, so you want to see that on an Alcozo dagger. I'll show you another thing. The eyelets on Alcozos, see they have sleeves in the eyelets, and they're only double serrated instead of triple serrated. You want to see that. It's very, very important to know that. And the pommel is different on the Alcozo. And also on Alcozo, the back of the crossguard, instead of having the normal fouled anchors on both sides, it has a little diamond on the back. Only Alcozo did that during the Third Reich period. We see it on Imperial daggers, and again, it was a carryover. Another thing too that's interesting, Alcozo used a blade release button that was drilled through the crossguard. WKC and Icorn's button was just notched and held in by the butt plate and the crossguard being joined together. This button didn't fall out if you took the daggers apart. And then you also have lots of differences in the acanthus leaves on the crossguard too. But these are all things that if you get my Navy book, I show all this stuff in detail, and you can study all those things. But it's very, very, very important. I'll show you something else too. This is a Horster Navy dagger. Now what's interesting about Horster naval daggers, and you don't see this all the time, but you do a lot, look at the size of those eyelets compared to normal eyelets. See how big they are? These were made by a generic producer, because you'll see normal eyelets on Horster too. In fact, Horster used a lot of generic parts. So again, that's something, if you see it on a Horster, you also see it on a Wyersburg dagger once in a while too, because they bought a lot of generic parts. It's all stuff that goes into authenticity, and when you want to buy a dagger, you want to be certain that all the pieces are original to it. And if you know this stuff, or you can look it up in my Navy book, it'll make you feel good. You know you're getting your money's worth. Okay, with naval daggers, and also I want to point out that You could order the lightning bolt scabbard, which we just discussed, and you could also order the hammered scabbard. We'll put the two next to each other, and when you look at the hammered scabbard, it's beautifully peened, and the lightning bolts, of course, have the engravings in them. The way the scabbards were made, they were made in two halves, and they were stamped. Then the two halves were welded together on a seam along the edge and completely smoothed, and then the entire piece was gilded so that you don't see the edge at all. The hammered scabbard was at extra cost. That's why we do not see as many of them as we do lightning bolt scabbards. Also, I'll show you that these two pieces are interesting in that these were both produced by the WKC firm, and you'll notice they both have orange grips. Eichhorn did not offer an orange grip, and if you have an orange grip on your Eichhorn, somebody changed it. The orange grip was made of solid celluloid, different from the standard grip, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. But these are very desirable WKCs. They came with double etch blades with either the fouled anchor motif or the sailing ship motif. These are both the fouled anchor, but the sailing ship motif was kind of offered prior to about 1938. WKC daggers after 1939 tend to always have the fouled anchor. Now, some manufacturers offered both, like WKC. Other manufacturers, like FW Holler, only made the sailing ship blade. So that's good to know. I think what we should talk about too is the fact that you will see three different kinds of portapiece worn on naval daggers. I'll try to show you the three right here. The center example is a silver bullion portapiece. In the hobby they always call it a gold portapiece because it turned gold from patina over the years. But it's actually silver bullion, and that's what you'll see on most earlier daggers. Then after that, the Navy used standard Army style portapiece made of aluminum, and that was pretty much up to 1940, 1941. And then after that, with the development of nylon, you'll see nylon portapiece on many daggers. So you'll see those three types of portapiece. Now, I mentioned grips, so let's talk about grips a little bit. The standard grip that we see most of the time is a carved wood base with a celluloid covering. Now, celluloid was the predecessor of plastic, and as you know, like with the old movies, they were made of celluloid, and they have to keep trying to recapture them and put them on the regular film because the celluloid it breaks up and it just doesn't last. So with the naval grip, it was covered with celluloid. You can see the wood inside. See how the celluloid covers the wood on the top and also on the bottom. See the wood inside. So what happens with these over the years, the wood shrinks and the celluloid tends to become like an eggshell, very, very brittle, and you get these kind of cracks that occur in the grip. And also what causes these cracks, many collectors get a naval dagger with a celluloid grip, and the grip has shrunk over the years, so the pommel's a little loose. So what they do is turn the pommel all the way around, and it squeezes down on the celluloid and breaks it. And if you have a real tight pommel like that, another problem too is if you're shipping the dagger in the wintertime when it's really cold. I've had several daggers arrive with broken grips when they were perfect when I sent them out. So I don't send naval daggers out in the wintertime anymore. So that's some of the things that can happen. If your pommel is loose, it's not something that you just want to, like I just said, just turn it around, because you'll ruin the grip. There are things that you can do to countermeasure the problem. There's one thing you can do. If the grip needs to be turned, if it's halfway and it's tight, if you're a mechanic, if you're not mechanically inclined, don't do it. You'll ruin things. But you can remove your pommel and just cut 1/1000th of an inch off of the bottom of the pommel pedestal, which won't show, and that reduces the size of the pommel, where you can again turn it to where you want it. Another way to accomplish the same thing is to cut 1/1000th of an inch off of the neck of the cross guard, the little piece that sticks up that accepts the grip. By doing that, the grip will go in further and allow you to do that extra half a turn. But by all means, do not ever turn the pommel till it's too tight, or you'll break your grip. So that's what the celluloid over wood grips were. When we see an orange grip, it has to be solid celluloid. There's no such thing as an orange grip that is not celluloid or Trolon, as it's really called. And you can tell solid celluloid easily because there's no wood in the center. Now these grips were most probably issued in a yellow, and over the years, as we know, sunlight or whatever affects the color of celluloid, and it turns a beautiful orange, which does us collectors kind of a favor. So that's what the celluloid grips are. Then you also see solid ivory grips. Solid ivory was available, but it costs probably as much extra as the cost of the dagger, so we don't see it very often. Usually it's just on special pieces or somebody that had a lot of money. And ivory, usually, not all the time, but it will crack over the years because it's a living item. It's like a tooth is what it really is. And we love cracks in ivory because it gives it lots of character. And ivory also develops a grain to it over the years, which can turn golden, and it's pretty neat stuff. So that's what the grips are, and don't let your grip look like that. And you will if you turn the pommel too tight. It's very, very important. Okay, so as we mentioned, daggers were issued with etch blades, but there were also NCOs that were qualified to wear a dagger. And the difference being NCOs didn't have to pay for their daggers, whereas officers did. So the Navy was purchasing the dagger for the NCO. So they kind of went on the cheap. So what you'll see, I think this version this is a beautiful NCO piece in really mint condition, and he must have been a high NCO as he was qualified to wear the Portapee too. But if you look at the blade, oh, this is the wrong dagger. But you will see them with plain blades. This is just a beautiful WKC in absolute mint condition. Mint officers, you'll never see one better than that. But let me show you the one I was trying to, it must be this piece. It has a plain blade, so that more than likely an NCO wore this. because the Navy didn't want to pay the extra to have the double etching done. And like I said before, if you study the fittings like that are in my book, you can study all that, you'll see that this dagger, even though it has no maker mark on it, was produced by WKC. And chances are WKC ordered 1,000 of these from the factory with no maker mark on them. They may use 2 or 3 factories to do the job, but you know that WKC made this particular one if you know about these fittings and the scabbards. It's a very, it's an easy thing to learn, and it can save you a lot of money and really make you feel like you know something in the hobby too. It's great stuff. So let me just show you a couple pictures that I find interesting. On this first picture, what we're seeing here is a group of officers on board of a ship, and these guys are all officer candidates, Fonrichs. And once they became a candidate, they were entitled to have a dagger. And you can see here, this man is standing over a table of daggers. And they're all, if you look at the photo real closely, you can see that they're ball tops. And he's handing these daggers out to the Fonrichs. And in the next picture, it's the same scene. Here you can see him giving the dagger to the Fonrich. And if you look at it closely, you can see it's a ball pommel, so that we know that this photograph was taken before April of 1938. But it just shows you that this is what it was. I don't want you to think I'm wolfing you. So here we have a photograph of a lot of naval officers, and there's a couple of Luftwaffe guys mixed in there too. But if you look closely, you can see that all the pommels are round pommels, and they're all wearing portapies. That's a great picture. All right, here's a picture of Admiral Raider. He's saluting some officers, and you can see they're all wearing the dirks with the eagle pommel, so we know this was after 1938. And in the following picture, this is an earlier picture of Admiral Raider, and if you look real close, it's probably hard to see in the camera, but Admiral Raider is wearing his Imperial Naval Dagger. It has the capstan Imperial cross guards and the pommel of the Kaiser, the crown pommel. So this was taken, actually it was taken during a ship launching in 1935. Hitler's there, and there's Bruckner back there. And here we show Admiral Raider. He's attending a U-boat launching, and he's wearing the same dagger, but if you look closely, you'll see it has the eagle pommel on it, but still with the Imperial crossguard. So that's, like I was saying, you could wear your original dagger if you qualified for it. This is an officer here, a Lieutenant Zerzi, and he's his big claim to fame, he's got a sports badge, but he's also wearing a fine naval dagger with portapee. Here we have another officer. You have to look close in this picture, but his scabbard is a hammered scabbard, and he's a higher ranking officer. And in this picture, an officer wearing a naval brocade belt with a dagger. I love these period pictures. They show you so much. And then the last one is an officer with a naval dagger, and you can see the tie of the portapee and so forth. just really great stuff. Okay, so those are the standard daggers, the ones that we see 98% of the time. But thank goodness Soligan was in business to make money, like any other businesses, and they also offered lots of extra goodies if you wanted them. And some of the naval officers came from wealthy families. There were a lot of titled aristocrats in the Navy. And so you'll see once in a while daggers that are really special. So I'll show you a couple of those kind of things. This first piece here, what's special about this is you'll notice it doesn't have a hammered scabbard or a lightning bolt scabbard. It has what we call a chaste scabbard. And when we say chaste, we're not talking about something that was stamped. These scabbards were hand worked where the metal was moved to make these designs. The designs are very, very intricate and very, very difficult to do. Just look at the detail in the scabbard bands, and it just is it's a lovely, lovely thing. And then along with it, the grip is of solid ivory. There's no cracks in it, and it's absolutely beautiful. Wonderful, wonderful grip. The crossguard and the pommel are really, really nice. And then, and of course the knot too, which is original to the piece. And then you have an incredible Damascus Blade that's very, very beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. The blade is, it's not marked with a maker mark, but the tang is stamped Hector Damascener and P+D, which was the marking of Paul Dinger, the man who made the Hermann Goering wedding sword. He was a top Damascus of the period. So a dagger like this is just incredible and still in basic mint condition. Very, very nice. And I'll show you another one of the same kind of high-grade material. Look at the chasing on this scabbard. This stuff looks like it's moving. It's so beautiful. Kind of simulating a fish scale, and the plants and the leaves. The bands are incredible. The eyelets are engraved. The details in here. A beautiful knot. And again, the grip is ivory. This grip has a nice crack on the side, and it's a little darker on the reverse, which I imagine the dagger must have been sitting upside down for years to cause that. And surprisingly though, it has a standard fouled anchor blade. So maybe by the time the salesman got done adding up the costs, the purchaser said, "Oh, that's enough. I'll just settle for the etched blade." But still, what a wonderful, beautiful thing it is. You know, a dagger like this is a highlight of anybody's collection, and they sell for a lot of money, but they're worth it. I mean, they're a treasure, absolute treasure. Show you another one. This is one of my favorites. This dagger has a beautiful ivory grip that has some brown tones to it, and it's really special, just beautiful. See all that? Really great. And then the scabbard is completely engraved, has an anchor motif on the top and a sea serpent below, and then on the other side has the anchor and a battleship. These pieces were reproduced by Holler after the war, and we see a lot of them. They're all brand new and all that, but this one was This is an original that was well worn despite its beauty. And then to really add to the piece is a Damascus blade that just makes you shiver. It's so fantastic. Look at the action going on in there. Just fantastic. Unbelievable. And on the other side it has the Tiger maker mark. Now Tiger didn't make naval daggers, but they obviously had an order for this fantastic piece and had it fulfilled and had their name put onto it. But just look at that Damascus. Isn't that something? It's just beautiful. I've never seen a better blade. I just think it's a great dagger. One of my favorites. And then there were other daggers too that were kind of special. This dagger has nothing different going for it on the outside, but it's the blade that we're talking about here. The Obverse Blade features a battleship off of the Alcozo, and then on the other side of it, we'll turn it over, and you have a U-boat which has U9 on the bow, and I think the conning tower of the U-boat. And these were, they weren't made by, but they were sold by Robert Class. You'll see them with Robert Class's trademark, sometimes on the reverse Alcozo, sometimes on the obverse Alcozo. And I've also seen these U9 blades produced with no maker. I suspect that Class just had them made on order, and we see very, very few of them, and they've become a premier dagger that's extremely desirable. The U9, you collectors may know, was the U-boat that belonged to Wittmann, the Imperial U-boat commander that sunk 3 British ships all in about an hour. So he went down as a legend in naval history. So you can see a Kriegsmarine officer wanting a blade like that. Great thing. Great thing if you can find one. And then lastly, Puma decided that in 1939 they wanted to redesign their naval dagger. So we call it a naval assault dagger that was made up by Jim Atwood, because collectors need to know what something is before they'll buy it. But in reality, if you look in the Puma catalog, you'll see in 1939 they called this their basic dagger, and that's what they were going to make for naval daggers. But as it turned out, the war broke out, and there were virtually no sales of this dagger, so very, very few of them exist. When they came out, they had a pommel that's kind of has square shapes that go around it with designs. And apparently the man that had this dagger didn't like the pommel and changed it to the 1938 version. But when you see these daggers, they come with a hammered scabbard and also a lightning bolt scabbard, but they always have what looks like an army carrying band. See how the carrying band looks like an army, not a navy? And most of the time, the ones I've had, the original ones are plain blades with a Puma mark on the Alcozo. These daggers are extremely rare, and tons of reproductions. You'll see a lot of reproductions with E, P, and S's mark on them, which is silly. E, P, and S never made them, and the mark they use is prior to 1938, and we know that these didn't come out to 1939. So if you're, ever going to buy one of these, it's only a Puma example that you want to get. I show this picture. You probably saw while I was talking of the. This is the piece I just showed you, and this is how the standard piece looked. And it could have come with a hammered or engraved scabbard, which this one has. And there's the two from the reverse, both with the Puma plain blades. And this is a damask piece produced by Alcozo. And if your camera can get in, you can just see the Alcozo trademark on the blade. And what's fun to see, remember what I told you about the diamond on the back of the crossguard? Remember what I told you about the sleeves on the carrying ring? See, they're all there. So that's a dagger that, boom, it's bright, it clicks. There's another picture of it with the tang, and it's marked Hector Damascus CW. That was Carl Wester. He was also a smith during the period. And then it's fun if you can get a absolute mint dagger with the issue bag. This is an Eichhorn with the Eichhorn bag and the model number 1671, which if you look up in the Eichhorn catalog, that was for Naval Daggers, and it's also marked Marine. Here's another one. The guy didn't get too lucky because somebody ripped off half the bag, but for some reason saved it, but it still has the model number on it. Let's see what we got here. Here's a WKC version with the original bag, with the original knot still in the bag and the tag and the straps. You know, stuff like this. I mean, this is the highlight of your collection if you could ever find it. It's great, just wonderful. This is a dagger that's owned by Doug Gow in New Zealand. Just a fantastic Huller piece that was presented to a naval group, but it has blue panel blade, dedication on the obverse side, and a beautiful scabbard that's engraved similar to the one that I just showed you by Tiger. Just a great dagger. This was originally turned up by Jack Angolia. And then sometimes people, they wanted to have their personalization on the dagger. You'll see all kinds of different ways of doing it. And in this case, the officer had his initials engraved on both the scabbard and on the blade. It looks like AV as in Victor. Let's see what else we got here. This is another Damascus Blade. It's probably from the Imperial time, remounted into a Third Reich dagger. It has the name of a retail distributor on the blade, and the man that bought this blade probably paid a lot of money for it, so when he went into the Kriegsmarine, he had it remounted, something that we see. This is the other side of the blade, and it was produced by the WKC firm. Same dagger. This is a dagger with a Chaste Scabbard and a blue panel with a dedication on it. Very beautiful. And you can see that it was ordered through this company, Kalani. They ordered the dagger and had it made through one of the producers. These are some of the things you'll see once in a while. Here's a dagger that has a applied anchor onto the grip. Great thing. Probably some hotshot NCO had that done. And this is a piece you don't see often. It's by P.D. Luneschloss. Has a beautiful orange grip and a changeover pommel, so it comes from the early 30s probably. Also the figure 8 bands. And then here's a beautiful piece with the original bag that was obviously owned by a naval radio operator. Beautiful. And these are just kind of a scan of what you see in daggers. And before we leave the subject, I want to show you that the hangers and the belt on Kriegsmarine pieces, we normally see aluminum base fittings gilded, which are the case on this set of daggers with the dress belt. Very beautiful. You want to avoid hangers where the buckles are brass and the snaps are aluminum. Usually they're made up after the war. They need to be all the same, and that's the way they should be. Okay, before we close the subject, I want to talk a little bit about naval swords also. It was required that naval officers buy a sword, although once the war started, not many of them really did, and therefore we don't see a lot of naval swords. And then one of the problems with naval swords too is the fact that the Nazi motif was not adopted until 1938. So a lot of swords that were worn during the Third Reich period have no Hakenkreuz on them. So collectors are, maybe it's Weimar, I don't know, you know, so they're kind of reluctant to buy them, which is a shame. But anyhow, with naval swords, this is a NCO piece, and remember I said with daggers that the Navy bought pieces for the NCOs, and this was the case here. This was a high-up petty officer. You can tell that the Navy had to buy the sword for him because they didn't want to pay for any eyes in the lion head. So they kind of went on the cheap there. And then another thing they did, it's a plain blade, not etched. Again, the etched blade was more expensive. But I'm sure the NCO that wore this was very happy with it. And he had a knot and all too, so he must have been a high-up petty officer. But very beautiful. The grip is celluloid over wood. The clamshell folds with a hinge. The scabbards are all of leather base, and the scabbard mounts are retained with staples. On this particular piece, since the Navy bought the piece, they wanted it back when this guy was done with it. So what they did was property stamped it. You see the letter O and then a number. O stood for Ostsee, which meant the East Seaport, which was Wilhelmshaven. So whether they ever got the sword back or not, I don't know, because some GI probably got it before they got it back. But anyhow, that's what you see with NCO swords. And then I'll show you this is a Third Reich, definite Third Reich officer's piece made by WKC. Unfortunately, it's got a little crack there, again the celluloid problem, but it has the red and green eyes. You know that naval navigation, the buoys, if you're on coming port to starboard, it's green or red respectively. It has a folding clamshell with the belt anchor on it and a folding lock. The leather scabbard with the staples and the brass mounts. And this particular piece was made by WKC. And WKC, they had 4 or 5 different blade patterns they offered. But this particular pattern, which is very desirable by collectors, if the camera can get into it, I'll put it on the table. You see the ship here, and if you look at the ensigns flying, they have Hakenkreuz, Nazi symbol in them. So nobody can dispute that that piece is of Nazi vintage and therefore very, very desirable. As I said, though, naval swords in general are pretty hard to find, and they make a nice touch to any collector. And I'll show you that there's a nice picture of a new officer there. He's getting married. Looks like a half-decent woman, good for him. And see his sword there? He's got his hand over it, but you can still see the cross guard and the portopee and so forth. Very, very nice. And then there's another picture. This guy looks like a Fonrik Zerzi. He's wearing his sword with portopee also. So that kind of sums up what I want to talk about with naval stuff. I mean, I could go on for hours with all the different subtleties and things, but what I suggest, you know, if you're interested in this end of the hobby, in my book, my naval book, I show all of these details much more than what I mentioned in the seminar, and it's only $70, and there's many thousands of dollars worth of savings for you if you follow what I tell you in the book. So $70 is nothing. I suggest if you're interested in this, and why wouldn't you be? Naval daggers are beautiful, but you want them to be correct. Get the book, it's worthwhile. So anyhow, thanks a lot for listening to all this. I hope it wasn't too long, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions, I'm available on the email, and I'm always glad to help anybody where I can. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you soon.